Welcome to the world premiere of First Date Last Call. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody.
It's so weird to welcome a vastness of people we can't see.
Yes, very, very strange. And some of my friends are texting me, no, we cannot see or hear you, but you can comment in the chat. And please do comment in the chat via Facebook and YouTube. There will be plenty of opportunity.
From you? Yeah.
Yeah, plenty of opportunity to ask questions to us and our wonderful panelists that will be coming on after the screening. Thank you so much to the American Association of Suicidology for hosting us. We are so excited to be able to do some incredible, we're so excited to partner with them for some of the incredible work that they do. And tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about suicide loss survivorship, which is a major theme in the film. So thanks again to the American Association of Suicidology and the incredible Chris Maxwell, who's running tech for us behind the scenes.
I want to shout out some friends. Oh my goodness, you guys are amazing. Maria's here, Asher is here, Whitney, Albert, you guys are the best. I love the chat.
Our incredible director, Elise Sievert-Bouchon, is in the chat. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh.
I have to say, this is one of the joys of being able to do this live because we're across the country and our crew has been spread across, and it's so great to have you guys join us. Our audience is across the country, so this is a thrill to have you guys here with us. Thank you.
Oh, and apparently I just got a text from a friend saying both our amazing director of photography, Caroline Mariko Stuckey, is watching with our incredible camera operator, Eric Richardson. Thank you. If there's any other crew or cast, anybody else that participated in the film, please say hello in the chat so we can give you all the love, because those two freezing cold January days were amazing, and you guys were incredible.
We had the most amazing crew, the best people. We should introduce ourselves for those who don't know one or the other. Since we're so excited to see you guys, but you may not know both of us. I'm Sam Garland. I am the producer and co-star of this film that Michael wrote called First Date Last Call. And yeah.
Yeah, and as Sam said, I'm Michael Tyler. I wrote the film, I co-produced the film, and you'll see my face in the film a little bit as well. So that's us. We are going to have a couple of guests, which we will just briefly mention here. From the American Association of Suicidology, Dr. Vanessa McGann will be with us. And Sam, you can introduce.
And we have a certified master life coach named Kathryn Green from Reclaim Your Life, who's going to be joining us tonight. I don't want to give too much away about the film, but if anyone who obviously is RSVP knows that one of the reasons that brought us together in making the film, and one of the topics that we explored in making this film, was the idea of suicide prevention and losing a loved one to suicide. And so I've always thought that as much as there was so much joy in making this film and so much healing in it, that one of my great desires for it was that when we screened it and introduced it to the world, we would also join a conversation with people in this topic that I've always just not myself even known how to talk about, and I think doesn't get talked about and we don't necessarily have the tools for. So our hope is that you get to laugh and get your heart broken maybe a little bit in the movie, and come back and we get to talk. And I've always thought also we're lay people who kind of went through an experience and have our own personal journeys to share, but I always wanted someone who knew a little bit more and had a little expertise, who could maybe answer some of your questions and have information to share. So we've invited two incredible guest speakers tonight to share personal journeys and also like really concrete advice. So we're really thrilled to have them. So when you come back after the film, we're gonna chat a bit about our journey making the movie, what sparked kind of our best, worst memories of being on set, our amazing crew. We'll just chat a bit just so you guys get a behind the scenes look at what it was like for us to make this film. And then we're gonna introduce our two guest speakers and shift the conversation a bit into kind of art and healing and journeys and life and all that good stuff all together. Yeah?
So we have a good 40 or so people in the stream, which is awesome. Maybe in the next couple of minutes, a few more people will trickle
Hi,
in.
Emily.
Yeah. Hello, Yukiko. I'm excited to do your reading. Hello, Laurel.
So excited.
Oh, thank you so much to everybody from Kimball Studio, including Asher Farkas, the incredible manager there. That's actually where Sam and I met. We were trying to remember precisely how. We know it's a Kimball Studio connection. Don't remember exactly how, but in the before times, we lived about 10 minutes apart, walking apart. So when we discovered that, we would go over to each other's places and help with self-tapes and with running scenes and lines. And eventually I was working on this script and asked Sam to read it, and we'll talk a little bit more about that afterwards. But it was a wonderful Kimball Studio connection that brought us together. And oh my goodness, somebody from my high school class, Emily Ringel, is here. I probably haven't seen Emily in a decade. So thank you so much for coming, Emily.
You guys are just the best audience. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for letting us know that you're here. It's such a weird time to be sharing something and to not be able to see your faces. So it just means so much that you're able to comment and let us know, because we're really, really thrilled to share this movie with all of you.
Yeah. Cool. Sam, I think we've vamped a decent amount. Have we done enough vamping?
We want to let everyone trickle in, and I think we did that well. I think we've hosted the opening of the party.
Amazing. So thank you everyone for joining us from whatever time zone you're in. We're definitely all across the North American continent. If you're from anywhere even further, please let us know in the chat. We want to celebrate everybody here. But without further ado, Chris, why don't you bring up the film and let's watch it.
We'll see you after.
All right.
Where should I be? Let me find out where you are. You found me out of this world. Can you find me in the dark?
Hey, it's Aria. Voicemails are weird, but if you gotta leave one, leave one. Sorry you missed me.
You know, I've been paying your phone bill for a year. The least you could do is pick up.
I don't think I can do this.
You can have a conversation. Just go conversate.
But what if it comes to,
don't worry about sex until it's time to worry about sex.
I'm worried about it now. It's worrisome. I haven't had...
Let's not talk about your erections.
Lack of erections?
Total and complete lack of erections. I know.
I haven't been hard in over a year.
Okay, just shut up. And get in there and be yourself and shut up.
I'm getting mixed messages. Should I be myself or should I shut up?
Shut up. Get in there.
No, I can't do it. I'm going home.
Robert!
Don't call me that.
You are not going home.
Why do you feel the need to set me up all the time?
Set you up.
This is a setup. Aria was a setup.
Aria was not a setup. Aria just happened.
Aria just happened.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm super okay. I'm incredibly okay. What could I possibly be besides extraordinarily okay? Do I look okay?
You look great. You look phenomenal. I want to climb your tall, rugged body and make a nest in your hair.
Jesus.
And be gentle.
I can't afford a therapist, but that's what sisters are for.
How you doing?
Oh, I'm fine.
You look fine. Hey-oh.
Are you okay?
I'm okay. Are you okay?
You seem a little nervous.
You seem nervous. No, you don't. You seem cool.
I am a little nervous.
You're a summertime suburban sprinkler system. You're an above-ground pool. You're a hose without a nozzle.
Do you need some water?
No, I'm fine.
Or like a yard to play in?
I'm fine. You're fine.
You're making me more nervous.
Don't be nervous. Just be yourself.
That was my game plan.
It's a good game plan.
Good.
Good. Just be gentle.
What?
Nothing. Just go.
Be gentle?
Don't freak out.
I am not freaking out.
You are a little bit.
You are a little bit. Shit!
Invisible cigarette.
Yes, please.
God, these things will kill you. I'm sorry.
It's fine. I should head in.
Cool. Oh! I smacked your ass. But I wanted to smack your ass. Don't be weird about it. I'm not being weird about it. Just go have fun.
I miss you. I even miss you stealing my scarves.
Rob?
Hi, Kira,
You're Melody's friend.
best friend. I don't know why I specified that.
Okay.
I'm a little nervous.
Invisible cigarette?
What?
Nothing. I have an idea.
Great.
On the count of 3, let's just say the thing we're most nervous to tell the other person. 1, 2,
Oh,
3.
God. My girlfriend killed herself a year ago, and I haven't had an erection since.
I was recently diagnosed with a brain tumor and have less than a year to live.
Wow.
Seems like we got a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
I guess a few moments of happiness are all any of us can manufacture. And you couldn't manufacture anymore. So you quit. And I'm trying to manufacture just a few more moments of happiness. I'm leaving you voicemails so I don't forget the sound of your voice. Because I can't stand the silence without you.
Hey, it's Aria. Voicemails are weird, but if you gotta leave one, leave one. Sorry you missed me.
I have to say, actually, the music at the end and seeing all the cast and crew makes me so happy. And I'm remembering our incredible editor and the incredible music that was written. And it's a real joy. And thank you for the comments. I just saw that my high school drama teacher is here, Mr. Fred, which is to me an incredible joy. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you all so much for coming and for going through this journey with us. And I kind of do find every time I watch the film, it is a bit of a journey. And now, especially watching it with 60 plus people, it's quite something. We'll talk more about, I guess, and a reminder, if you guys have any questions about the making of the film or anything that went into it, please drop it into the chat, and we will try to address everything. So I just want to say thanks so much for coming and watching. This is the first time I've watched it with people other than, like, you know, friends and family who are very close. So thanks so much.
Yeah. Well, let's take a moment and just celebrate our world premiere. Thank you for being here and, like, sharing with us this. We always call it our little movie. You know, the movie that we put, My Little Baby. I feel like this thing we poured our heart and souls into. It was such a joy to work with Michael. I've always said we make really great creative partners. It's been such an amazing journey, but it's also been something we've just kind of, like, carried around on our own, and, like, it's just an amazing thing to be able to share it with people. And I miss being in an audience and hearing people around me gasp or laugh or think, you know, but I'm just loving the comments. So thank you so much for sharing your experience of it, because it just helps us kind of process it and, I guess, experience it with you. And it's just a real joy to be able to share that. So I'm going to start asking questions, because we're going to do a talk back out of this. I always love the Q&A. I remember kind of how we decided to make this film, and I love the story of how you sent me the script. But will you go back and tell us kind of where you were at before you even, like, approached me with the script? Do you remember what started for you or had been rumbling around in your brain a bit?
Yeah. So I was working on a feature-length version of this script, and these 3 scenes sort of just, I don't know, like, the characters were kind of there, and these scenes kind of just came out at a certain point. I think I just, like, literally wrote them in, like, a Word doc, not using, like, a script processor or anything like that. And just the humor of it, it was, as I imagine many of you can guess, like, grieving, you know, some losses of my own. And so I was trying to tell a story that talked about loss, and it talked about grief, and it talked about my own struggle with having had suicidal thoughts. And Sam and I were talking yesterday about, like, hey, how much of this we actually haven't talked to each other a lot about our own stories around this. And I'm kind of realizing I started trying to write this story in, like, you know, computer form and script form as a way to help me talk about my own story. And these 3 scenes kind of were the first ones to come out, and they made me laugh, and they made me, like, I was just like, oh, this is weird and interesting. And I was working on the feature length, and I don't know where Sam went. But I was working on the feature length, and these 3 scenes were just really strong to me in the middle. And then I had another friend pass. You saw his name at the end. His name was Noah. It was not a suicide, but Noah passed. And because I was thinking so much about the losses to premature death that I had experienced, I was like scared. I was like, oh my gosh, am I drawing this closer to me because I'm thinking about it with the script? And I just put it aside for a long time. And then I felt like I needed to tell the story at a certain point. And so Sam, you and I were working on, scripts together, and, both of us had aspirations to make films, and I'd seen one of the ones that you'd made. So I just, read it, hoping that you would like it, because I thought you were really good for the character that you played. And you did. And then that's how we went. So I guess
my favorite story about that Because like you said earlier, so we went to the same acting studio and knew each other. What I find funny is I don't remember us ever taking a class together, so I don't remember where we met, but we are part of the same amazing community of Kimball Studio. And as you said in the beginning, we used to come to my place and like rehearse scenes and stuff. And at one point you sent me a script and we're like, I've been working on this thing. What do you think? And I remember laughing out loud on the first page and thinking I'd be so great for this role and it'd be so much fun to make it. And I remember you afterwards saying you secretly hoped I would say that when you sent me the script. You didn't tell me. You're just like, oh, I got this thing I'm thinking about. And I was like, oh my God, we should make this. And we're like, I was so hoping you would say that. Because I'd made a short film a few years before that I had written that had done pretty well. And so I kind of already knew some of the logistics of production and everything else. And we were just really good together in terms of being on the same page creatively. And I'm really glad you had that Machiavellian streak to you. It worked out really well for us.
Yeah. So yeah, it really worked out, and it was we were really thankful to Elise, the director, to help us figure out, like, there's 3 characters and there's kind of not necessarily one lead, and to figure out how to tell the story through one person's eyes more than the other. So she was incredibly instrumental in that, and incredibly instrumental in balancing what we were hoping we were successful in doing, is balancing the comedy of it and balancing the heartbreak of it. Because in my experience, that's how it goes. Like, when someone passes unexpectedly, you're not just crying all the time. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of depression and despondency and not knowing what to do, but there's also so much work to try to put the pieces back together, whatever pieces they are. And there's dark humor, there's gallows humor, and there's wanting to reconnect and wanting to go on dates and wanting to connect with people, and then all the struggle that comes with that. So I wanted to have characters that were brave in maybe a way that I wasn't, that just said, on the count of 3, just say the thing you're most nervous to say. And I guess that's what happened. And yes, 4 characters. We do hear the voice of Aria, who had passed on, and she's an important character in this film, even though we didn't see her face. So that's a little bit of my story. Sam, you and I have talked a little bit about why you wanted to do an impact campaign around suicide loss survivorship. If you have anything you want to say about that before we...
Yeah, it's so interesting. I'm trying to remember the timeline of when we started working on this film. It must have been somewhere in the end of 2017. And it's true. We were talking about this yesterday, and I realized there's so much about our own losses that we never really talked about. And there's a way in which I think you're very right. We use this film in its own way as a processing, because there were still things that I don't know how to talk about. But I had a friend who was a coworker who died by suicide. And it's really interesting because I'm realizing more and more it's about 4 years to the date of this time. It was around election. She had just come back from canvassing for Hillary. There was the same kind of incredible anxiety, animosity, stress, uncertainty about the world that we're experiencing. I mean, different 4 years ago when we really thought, we never thought we would end up with 45 as our president. But I remember just that kind of chaos and hatred and stuff and the anxiety that everyone was feeling. But I had this friend at work who was like the sweetest person, the light of the office. We would giggle and crack jokes, and she died by suicide. And it was one of the reasons that I really connected with Michael about the fact that we both lost someone in this way. Is like, there's the grief you go through when things happen that you can't understand. And there's the grief of losing someone, which is already its own work. But then there's what the hell happened and why and what did I miss? And I thought, not that we were super close, but I definitely thought I was someone who could talk about anything, who could come to if she needed to. Like, I didn't have a clue. And I think a lot of people felt that way. There was a huge memorial service, and she had like so many friends, and she was a volunteer in so many places, and she was just so beloved. And it just didn't and still doesn't compute. And it's still a thing where I'm just like, I don't understand this thing that happens. And I think it's a thing that we as a society don't really yet know how to talk about. It's a thing that I think we don't understand happens a lot more often than we realize. Unfortunately, I've been hearing about it more and more. I think this time of uncertainty between, my goodness, all that's going on in the world, between the virus and the whatever economic struggles that are happening and the election, anytime anxiety goes up, anytime uncertainty goes up, pre-existing struggles get worsened. And so, but even before then, I mean, it's always been a thing. And so it was, I think, for me, it sent me on a path of, I've always been a big self-development guru. So it sent me on a path of like, what can I learn about myself? The thing I think we haven't talked about as much, Michael, is it also kind of triggered my own suicidal ideation, which I'd struggled with in my 20s. And there was definitely this fear of like, wait, is that a choice? Is that a thing I should be and like, I scared myself and I was like, okay, I got to get help. And I've always known that. I was like, if I go down that path, I'm going to figure out how to reach out. And I reached out to a bunch of people and a bunch of things and kind of went down this journey. And I spent a lot of 2017 just being between being shaken up by this friend and shaken up by the election of Trump, really just like, I don't know how to feel good about myself in this world when there's chaos and there's pain. And so I did a lot of work on myself. And by the time the film came around, that was kind of one of the reasons, because I had the same thing of like, grief is such a weird thing, but so is like not knowing and not having answers, and the way that it also kind of makes you question your own sense of self and your own sanity maybe, and your own, I don't know, like it was a real turbulent time. And so I love that it was funny, and I love that it was raw, and I love it was like, I have a very dark humor that I think not everyone knows about me, that like very close friends here. And I was like, oh yeah, we're on the same page about this. And so I really appreciated that.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for sharing that. And I've noticed that I think at least 3 people in the chat have said that they've lost somebody to death by suicide. And I think just saying that, typing that into a chat with people that you don't know is an incredible act of vulnerability. So thank you for sharing that to the people who have mentioned it. I'm so glad that we're partnering with the American Association of Suicidology for this. An expert is going to be on the screen in just a couple of minutes. And Chris, I think you mentioned you can, I don't know if you already have, but if you can pin the phone number, somebody help me out with words here.
Suicide prevention lifeline. We want to just make sure that number was here for all of you guys, just because anytime we talk about a topic like this, stuff might come up, and we want to make sure you feel really resourced and really feel like you're supported. Yeah. There's a question about the film, if we've got time for one question.
Yeah, I think I saw 1 or 2 questions, and then we can bring on Kathryn and Vanessa.
Yeah, so Beth wanted to know, what were your biggest fears or concerns about making this film?
Well, my first and biggest fear was just like, are people going to think it's funny? Like, are people going to laugh at the jokes? I remember when we first we put out the breakdown for casting the role of Kira, which I don't know if Mariette Strauss was here, but she did such an incredible job.
I love her so much.
Yeah, we had probably like 40 or 50 tapes come in for it, which was incredible. And I was so glad that the first one that I watched, the actress who we didn't end up casting, but she got it. Like, it made sense. I was like, oh my goodness. I watched a bunch where it didn't, like, they didn't get it. And I was like, oh my goodness, my writing is terrible, all this. So one of my biggest fears, and it's still a fear of sharing this with human beings outside of myself, is, does it make sense? Is it a story that makes sense? Do the jokes make people laugh? Do the characters resonate with people? So I hope they do. So that was my biggest fear, I think, is just like it working. Sam, I don't know if you had one.
I don't. I was lucky that I was aware that it was much harder for you because it was your script, and I already knew it was really good and had no like skin in the game in terms of that. So like I didn't have that additional thing. I was going to pivot and say, like, I'm curious what your favorite memory of it, because I have a really, really funny one, which is that we decided to shoot in January because production in January tends to be very slow in New York. And we thought, cool, we'll get all of our friends, or we'll be able to hire people who maybe are on hiatus and we're kind of bored and want to work on a thing, and they'll be available. We're such freaking geniuses. This will be great. We find these gorgeous outdoor murals. We're so proud of ourselves. We're so in love with like the set. We're like, we get on the first day of shooting, I swear to God, it starts snowing. We're standing there, we're freezing our asses off. I look at Michael and I go, what the hell were we thinking? It's snowing on us. We're so freezing cold. We had like all these extra coats every time they called cut. We had all of these like hand warmers everywhere. We had thought we were so smart, and we're like, this is why nobody shoots in January, because it's so cold.
Yeah, I definitely remember that. I was like, oh my goodness, are we going to have to delay this shoot if it like a blizzard comes? I think my scariest, my craziest memory on set was the day we were in the bar and Elise was making me say the word erection time after time because there was something in my head that just like didn't want to say it clearly doesn't want to now in a chat where my mother and my father and my aunts and uncles are probably in the chat. But here we are.
I remember that, and I can't believe you brought that up. And he had to be like, erection.
Thank you, Elise, for that.
He emphasized different parts of the word because he was tripping over it, and yes.
Yeah. So I did see one question earlier in the chat from my lovely Aunt Lori before we bring on the guests, and she asks, what's your plan? Where are you going to take it? We are hoping to do maybe some more events around this. Around like topics like this, suicide prevention and, suicide loss survivorship. We are also hoping to find some distribution things that we might or might not have in the works. So keep an eye on our social media feeds and our email blasts and our website and all that. But Sam, why don't we bring on, and Chris, why don't we bring on our two incredible guests? First, I think we're going to bring them both on at the same time. But first, we're going to talk to Kathryn Green. You can see, well, I don't know what corner she's in for you, but for me, she's in the bottom right corner. Kathryn Green transformed heart-wrenching tragedy into a long career helping people as a master certified life coach. Her coaching business, Reclaim Your Life, enables clients to move beyond the perceived limits of their past and reclaim their power. Sam, how did you connect with Kathryn? Kathryn, how did you connect with this project?
Well, I can start. I'm part of the Life Coach School, which Brooke Castillo founded, I want to say 3 years ago. She started as a weight loss coach and a life coach. And she's been actually a total lifesaver, game changer for me, specifically during COVID when like shelter from home and lockdown started. And I was like, I don't know if I can spend this much time in my own head without people. I started really diving into her podcast a lot and was on her online program. And Kathryn is a coach through the school. And part of what they do is they do coaching calls where people get to ask questions. And Kathryn had shared in one of her coaching sessions about the story, and she kind of just briefly mentioned it. It wasn't kind of the focus of it, but about the story of her husband and losing him to death by suicide. And just there was a way in which she spoke about her journey since then and how she had really done the work to find new ways to think about the experience so that it wasn't a thing that held her to her past. And I'm going to let her say it better than this, but that's what I got from it, that, it was, she really had worked at like, how did she want to experience it? How did she want to think about her husband? How did she want to think about, who he was in her life so that it propelled her into a better future rather than something that she got tied up in. I'm sure I'm not saying that right. So I would love for Kathryn to share kind of her experience and yeah.
Yeah. You said it beautifully, Sam. We could just be done and call it good. but we won't. We won't. Well, first, I just wanted to say thank you to Sam and Michael for inviting me to be part of this amazing project and discussion. I just can't even tell you. There's probably going to be a few emotional moments here for me, but it just means so much to me to be here with you all. You're both so talented, and I'm so thrilled to have met you. The film for me just has such an incredible message, the impact of loss in our lives and then what it means to be in that survivorship role, the power of feeling your feelings and being honest with your experience, and then the ultimate, which is how empowering it is when you talk about the things that are seemingly unspeakable. Right? There's so much power in that. And I'm just so blessed to be a part of this and incredibly honored to be here with you, with the panelists, and then of course, all the amazing people who are in the chat that we can't see. So, so good. So that's first and foremost. Thank you so much. So I'll just go a little bit into my story, and then maybe if there's just questions that you all want to ask me, that's fine. But it was just about 9 years ago now that I lost my husband to suicide. I lost him in December of 2011. And that next year, as those of us who've been through this or any sort of loss know, there's such a huge range of emotions that go along with it. The phases of grief and losing your spouse or your loved one. And I worked through a lot of the logistical things, right? The practical items. Like you're going through grief and there's all this practical stuff that you have to take care of. And it seems so insignificant. And yet there's this piece of it that is very grounding and brings you back to where you are. And I learned in all of that how to tell people what happened. And I remember being very concerned about talking about it, right? There's the stigma that goes along with it. And so what do you do with that? But over the course of that year, I learned how to do it. And over the course of the last 9 years, I've learned how more to do it and what it takes to do that. And I learned how to deal with the reactions, right? My own reactions, my own feelings that I had about it. And then interestingly enough, the feelings of the other people around me who had also lost him, right? Family and friends. And I really didn't know what to believe about my story, my life, who I am, right? What it all meant, what I wanted to do from this point forward. It just seemed so daunting and confusing. I felt blame and shame, the stigma of the experience. I felt these on a personal level. So based on the thoughts that I was having about myself, the judgments of myself in the situation. And then I also felt it on an external level from the people around me, the things that friends and family would say to me. And I was definitely like in the emotion, all the emotions of the experience. And I wasn't sure how to let it flow through me or even what that meant. I was navigating my experience in very uncharted waters. I hadn't been through this before. I'd been through loss, but not in this way. And I decided to ask for help. And I decided that it was okay to do so. I mean, that's part of the stigma as well, right? For all of us in any situation that we go through is we're afraid to ask for help and what that might mean about us. And I decided that I would try therapy. Therapy was brilliant, right? There's so much use in therapy and going through the grieving process and helping find that peace and guidance that can bring, and sharing your story and really just understanding what the story is that you're telling and how that impacts the way that you feel and what you're doing. And from there, in that sort of year of learning how to grieve, I realized that it was time to move on, right? And I didn't know what that meant, right? I didn't know what it was going to be like. And I learned through that how to use my story through coaching. I went to find a life coach. And I began the coaching with my story again, telling the story that I had told to the therapist. But in that, it was used to propel me forward rather than holding me back. I realized in that my story is mine, right? And I own it. I haven't let it go. It's still part of me. It's still the experience that I had, but it no longer holds the power to mean anything harmful or negative about me or my life or my husband or his life. And what I can't control, right, are a lot of the circumstances. None of us can control a lot of the circumstances that are outside of us in our lives. But what we do have control over is how we can respond to them. And that's what I learned through coaching. And I'm no longer at the mercy of life happening to me and therefore feeling all the feelings. I've realized that I have the power and the ability to choose what I think, how I feel, and the impact and the reactions that I want to have in relation to that. So it just doesn't mean anymore. What this means is that I still feel a negative emotion. Like I haven't moved from negative emotion to positive emotion and I'm just hanging out in the airy-fairy world. It's not like that, nor should it be. Right? I do feel negative emotion, and often I choose to feel negative emotion. I choose to feel sad about the loss of my loved one and the loss of the loved ones for other people. And it's okay. Okay? It's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to be okay.
Yeah.
When things aren't okay. So it's just it was an impactful experience, and it was one that I chose to propel me in a direction that I wanted to go. It was one that I chose to use to find out who I was, right? And more of who I am, and to become more of who I am.
Yeah, that's really a beautiful story of strength and growth. And thank you so much for sharing that with us, Kathryn.
Yeah, thank you.
I love that idea of it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to be okay. I think so much of the cognitive dissonance of grief is that there are moments you forget and you almost feel bad that you forgot. And there are moments when you're feeling okay, and then you're like, wait, I'm not ready to feel okay, right? And then there's also the like, grief can feel so all-consuming, and then maybe I judge myself a lot for every thought I'm feeling I ever have. So I think, oh, I shouldn't feel this bad, or it's not as whatever it is that thing is.
Yeah.
That letting, like, so much of it is judgment, right? Letting it be okay to be as wrecked as you will feel that day, and also maybe still gracious and full of grace and full of awe, and like those things just coexist in a weird way that I don't know how to explain the human brain, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're human beings, and we are made to feel all the feelings. We're not put on this earth to just feel happy all the time, even though somehow we got into our minds that that's what we're supposed to be, is just happy all the time. We're here to feel it all, right? Yeah. To feel the sadness and the grief and the love and the joy, and they coincide and they live together, and sometimes they're bigger, one's bigger than the other, but it's all the way it should be, always.
Yeah, there's something that you said when we first met that I think really caught me, because I hadn't had that experience, but this idea that you touched on a bit, that there's sort of, it felt like maybe there was judgment or concern from people who knew your husband in their way, different from your experience of your husband, and how that felt like maybe there was an idea of like a responsibility, or like, I don't know, that to me is like a whole other layer of entanglement that I didn't experience when I lost someone, because we weren't that close, and I didn't get caught up in those other relationships. But I imagine the way family systems are complicated to begin with. I wonder if you could speak a bit to what helped you untangle from that and let his experience be his experience, and maybe not responsible in the way maybe we make ourselves sometimes, in the way that's not, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, there's so much there to deal with. And for all of us, even when the relationships aren't as close, right? You have your own experience around it. And then for you, what you dealt with were your coworkers and their feelings and thoughts about it. So it's much the same sort of way in a family dynamic, but it's knowing that. I think what helped me finally get to sort of this sense of peace about my own experience, and then what others are experiencing, is that we all experience things very differently. There's not one way to experience grief. There's not one way to experience joy. There's not one way to experience loss. I mean, it's impossible. We think that people should look and do and feel a certain way when they go through certain things. And that's just not the case. Everyone responds to things differently. And when I realized that that was the case, when I really owned that that is the truth for me, then I was able to let go of how other people were and how they were treating me as a result of that. Or maybe the things that they were saying about Jason, right? Because they didn't know. They only knew a certain aspect of him. They only knew a certain aspect of me and our relationship. So it's okay. They have their own perspective. They have a very limited one, but they cannot have anything more than that. And that had to be okay with me. And once it was, everything opened up, right? More acceptance for myself, more acceptance and understanding for them. And then you can create your own story from there.
Yeah. There's a real power to releasing everyone to their own experience of the journey and of the work.
Yes. Yeah. And releasing yourself from what you think your experience should be, for sure.
Oof. I think that might be the hardest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if anybody has additional questions for Kathryn or Vanessa, who we'll introduce in just a moment, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We're loving this conversation so far. We're loving everybody dropping into the chat and giving us good vibes and sharing their own experiences. I would like to introduce our other guest, Dr. Vanessa McGann from the American Association of Suicidology. Dr. McGann is a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in traumatic loss. She consults nationally on topics related to suicide and postvention at various schools, colleges, and agencies, including the New York State Office of Mental Health. And we are so honored to have such an expert have joined us for our panel. So thankful for the wisdom that she can bring. Well, first, should I call you Vanessa or Dr. McGann? We didn't talk about this before.
Vanessa is fine.
Okay.
We feel like any title hard earned you get to claim, and so we felt bad calling you Vanessa, but we all go by first names, and we just okay.
Yeah.
Pretty casual here.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's interesting because I know we met through Suicidology in the American, or if it predated the work, or chicken and egg, vice versa. I was curious if you could kind of share your personal journey and maybe how that led to professional journey.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I had a lot of loss in my life as I was becoming a clinical psychologist. Both my parents died while I was in school, but I had just gotten licensed and was starting to work, and my sister, who had been very depressed for over a decade, took her life. So it was, it was earth-shattering and shocking, though in some ways not surprising, but it really, the emotions, I'll talk about in a minute, but the sort of cognitive part of me was sort of saying, wow, when my mom died, people reacted to me like this and were supportive and talked to me, and I had no kind of fear of what was going on. And when my dad died, I got this kind of reaction. And when my sister died, it was so very different to me, I think, because of the cause, because it was a suicide. And I felt like people got very scared of how to talk to me, how to manage me. They wanted to give me space. And I also felt, and I think you bring this up in the movie a bit, I was scared. I was scared I was never going to be the same person again. I was never going to feel joy or laugh or, want to make connections with new people and things like that. And it was this terrifying feeling. And I felt like I should have learned more about this in graduate school. I should have learned more about suicide and suicidal feelings and how to talk to people about suicide. And I felt like I should have learned more about grief, and in particular, grief, loss to suicide and grief to suicide, because it was just so astounding to me, the pain that I was going through, not only from losing my sister, but having to sort of grapple with a lot of people who just didn't know how to manage me or how to handle me, particularly I think in the mental health profession. So I sort of made it my mission, after doing a lot of the things I think that are similar to Kathryn, in terms of trying to get in touch with my own needs and fears and feelings, and creating space for myself to create my own narrative out of what happened, to also talk to survivors, loss survivors, learn from loss survivors, learn what's out there in the literature about working with loss survivors, and, create more resources for people. I had this moment, actually, I was sort of having this nervous breakdown on the floor of Barnes and Nobles, thinking like, how am I ever going to get through this? And, do I want to be a psychologist? And I found all these memoirs, not all of these memoirs, but a few memoirs from loss survivors. And they talked about similar themes that I was going through. And I thought, why aren't the professionals talking about this? Since then, I feel like there are a number more memoirs, there are more resources for loss survivors, but still to this day, I feel like it's a subject that's just so scary for people that they don't want to touch it. And that's what I kind of love about the movie, is that there's no fear in Sam and Michael about talking about this topic. And there's also no fear about making it really real. I feel like sometimes when we see loss survivor things portrayed, it's very, soft camera and beautiful and violins playing and not much, grit or humor. And I worry that some people who are experiencing losses look at those resources and don't find themselves in it and say, well, this isn't going to help me because this isn't how I feel. And I think that there's a certain chaos almost to what you guys were going through in the film about, like, how do we hold on to her, you know, calling the voicemail, listening to her voice? How do we move on and have erections or, you know, make love again? And how does that happen? And it's, I think you have to do it both through tears, but also through laughter and just sort of a self-acceptance for you are where you are, and it's tough and it's confusing and it's scary and it's painful, but it's also like exciting, and just we're alive and we have to make our way through it, and we make our way through it with like hope and laughter and everything. So that's what I really love about this film.
I have to say, I relate 1,000% to Barnes and Nobles, and in my 20s when I was going through the roughest time, I would go pretty much every day, often after therapy, and just go to the like self-help and the story section and the trauma section and the depression and just read. And it was such a resource. And what shocks me is to hear you talk about that there wasn't this resource in psychology, that you're going through grad school and you're getting all this training. And like that to me is shocking. You know, I definitely, as a layperson who didn't have all the resources I thought I had access to, was going to go find my answers at Barnes and Nobles. But for someone that's really interesting. And it's so kind of blows my mind that this is still so taboo, and I don't know what we do to change that other than this kind of thing, you know. And it was so funny because I've always had this vision that we'd have this conversation, and the closer we got to it, the more I was turning to Michael and going like, why did I want to do this? And it like hit me that I still have a lot of fear about that I still am like, I don't know if I'm going to say the right thing. What if I totally fuck this up and trigger someone or say the wrong thing? Or like, I have my own stuff that I carry around because that's what we do with us, and we haven't yet unpacked it enough that it feels really okay to talk about. So thank you for being here and being part of that change that I hope we see in this world.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here.
I love that that comment from Laura. I call it going to the hospital of books. I hope that you both have that experience.
1,000%.
So I guess, Vanessa, we want to ask a basic question. It's like, what do you say to somebody who has just gone through a loss from suicide? Because you know, I remember when I lost my friend to suicide, you know, almost probably more than a decade ago now, or when I've lost other friends and family members prematurely to loss. It's like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say to somebody who's lost. I don't know what to hear. I don't know what I want to hear. So do you have advice on how to talk to people who are reeling from this loss?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing is not to say too much, because I think we tend to be nervous and we want to say, oh, you know, maybe this was for the best, or something that just comes across as like totally insensitive and absurd because of our own anxiety about like what the right thing to say is. Maybe they're in a better place, you know, whatever. I've heard lots of, you know, poor things to say, but I always say, ask questions, you know, how are you doing? What does it feel like? What do you need? Can you tell me their story? You know, can you tell me about them? I think so often we hold on to our loved ones and we feel like people don't want to hear. They don't make the room for it. They feel awkward. So I think if you directly say, you know, tell me something about him or her, and you know, anything, their struggles, their loves, their passions, their hurts, just so you can get the person who's grieving to talk about their loved one, because I think that's really mostly what they want to do.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
I love your enthusiasm.
No, I do. And it's so interesting. And part of what I was remembering was like, oh, you know, like the platitudes, you know, and I don't mean to be dismissive, because I think people are genuinely trying to reach out.
Yeah.
I love your perspective of like, it's just nerves and we don't know what to say the right thing. And so we say something that doesn't maybe land right. And so I'm like thinking like all coming from good intentions. But yeah, that can hit so hard. And when you're grieving, maybe you don't have the space to like see that someone's trying their best and that's what they're saying. And so I just love this idea of flipping the script and asking questions.
Yeah.
And that idea of like, really like, how are you feeling? Like there's also such a thing of, we're so afraid of our own feelings and each other's, right? Which is what leads to this like more trauma and more whatever. And so this invitation to like, I'm here for it. If you're feeling joy, if you're feeling sadness, if you're feeling fear, like whatever, like that's such an open, connecting question.
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful way to invite like whatever it is, rather than trying to prescribe kind of what Kathryn had said earlier, there's no right way. And you're really, I think if someone asked me that, I feel like, oh, you're really here for this experience. Yeah. And that's just a beautiful way to go about it. Yeah.
And it might be that you want to have a dinner, a meal with them. I guess not with COVID, a socially distanced meal, you know, but you don't want to talk so much about the grief or your loved one or your memories, or it might be that that's all you want to talk about. But I think if, you know, as the person who's trying to support the grieving person, if you just make it all okay and say, you know, whatever you need, I'll be there and meet you at that place. I think that's the most important.
Even like, I don't know, I think we went for long walks, like that kind of thing. Like sometimes you're not ready to talk, or like, let's make a movie, or like there's other things you can do, but being available, to be there.
Hopefully there are less expensive ways of talking than making a movie, but it did help us definitely help the process.
There were days where I wouldn't pick up the phone, but that didn't mean I didn't want my friend to call me in 2 days and say, I'm calling you back just in case you're ready to talk today. Yeah. Hang in there.
Yeah.
We do have a question in the chat, and I'm going to have to ask for interpretation because it's from Emily Ringel, my high school classmate.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. McGann, I'm an LMFT working with kids 6 to 19 as well as with adults with complex trauma. I'm sure there is ITD info on this, but what is the latest research on SI prevention, particularly with the pandemic? I don't know what some of those acronyms mean.
Limited information. That's a pretty broad question. I'm trying to interpret it too. The suicide prevention in terms of complex trauma, or first of all, in terms of research, I don't think we have much yet on the pandemic and the impact in terms of the rates. I know that there are a lot of anecdotal sort of feelings that people are hearing about more suicides. And I work in a college, so I work with youth, and it feels like a lot of people are really struggling in profound ways with the isolation or living at home in ways that they didn't, but we don't really have research and data on it yet until the CDC sort of like gathers a lot of data. In terms of the complex trauma and the suicide, I just want to say this because Sam said she struggled a bit with suicide after the loss of her coworkers. And I would say that working with suicide loss survivors, you want to work with both the trauma. You have to look at the trauma and you have to look at the grief. And I think a lot of people who aren't very familiar or trained might just look at the grief and not realizing how much the trauma is sort of interfering with their therapeutic process. So it's really kind of a both and that you have to look at. And it's really important to ask loss survivors about their feelings of suicide themselves. I mean, I think I had passing feelings of being suicidal as well when my sister killed herself. And part of it, I think, was almost like an identification to try to understand what she was going through. And in that way, it's like slightly normative. But I think if it had kept going and if it was all that I could think about and if I had really started ruminating or making a plan, that's dangerous. And suicide loss survivors are at a higher risk of taking their lives. So you have to be sort of aware of that when you're working with someone and really keep that in your mind to make sure you're checking on the feelings about suicide.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
One question both for Vanessa and Kathryn. In your work as a psychologist and as a life coach, how has your your personal stories impacted and influence how you talk to your clients, if it does at all, or if you have found yourself relating to people in a different way because of the personal losses that you both shared with us this evening.
Kathryn, you want to?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go. I think what it has done for me is made me more understanding and more compassionate and more observant than ever before. More aware of just the ways that people respond, and really also realizing that I don't know how people are going to respond. So being more open and just allowing people to be who they are and to express what they express without the shock and the awe, because it isn't the way that I would act. It just allows me to hold the space for people so much easier now that I've been through my own experience in this particular context. And that goes across the board, anybody in any situation. It just allows you to be more present, more engaged, more compassionate and understanding, and more willing to hear what's going on.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
I would agree. I think that there's less fear of really sitting there in the darkness and the despair with somebody. I think before, I don't know, I would worry about 17 other things, and now really what I think about is just sort of meeting them where they are and sitting there with them in the pain. And I think that maybe in the past I was thinking of, how to fix something or move something along. And now I feel more that I'm bearing witness to something. And I know, like I've seen so many survivors just broken with grief, and then these beautiful kind of things and hopes and, dates come out of it. And so in some ways, it's a really beautiful place to work with traumatic loss. Because I really see the strength and the creativity and the love in people.
I love that, Vanessa, the bearing witness to something beautiful. I mean, truthfully, there isn't anything that needs to quote unquote be fixed when we're experiencing grief, right? And to just allow someone to be there and to express that and to understand that it's all part of the process can be incredibly powerful for people. Just to bear witness. So good.
Thanks. Well, this has been really powerful and incredible. We love all the support that we've seen about the film, all the incredible resources and vulnerability that both of our guests have shared, as well as the audience members in the chat. Thank you so much, everybody. We probably could talk for another hour, but I know on the East Coast it's past 9:30. It's getting close to bedtime. Some people, probably have to wait. It is a work night, so we are going to transition out of this incredible event. We want to thank everyone so much for coming. Thank you to Kathryn Green, and thank you for Dr. Vanessa McGann. And thank you so much to AAS, Suicidology. We are encouraging people to donate to the American Association of Suicidology if you can. Maybe the cost of a movie ticket, even if it is just a Tuesday $5 special, or if you're in Manhattan and you want to see an IMAX special, something like that. If you can. If you can't, that's totally understandable as well. But you can go to suicidology.org for that. Kathryn, would you like to say something about your business before we? Or
how people can reach out to you if there's something they want to follow up or would like to know more about your work? Would you be open to just sharing kind of? Yeah.
Absolutely. You can reach me on my website, which is www.reclaimthetrueyou.com. Like, is it com? Yes, it's .com. Reclaimthetrueyou.com. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at Reclaim the True You Coaching. So I'd love to speak to you. You can just reach out, connect with me, email me, whatever works. I'd be happy to chat. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And Vanessa, if there's anything you'd like to direct people's attention to besides suicidology, please take a moment. The screen is yours.
I have my own website, VanessaMcGann.phd.com, I think, if you want to ask me any questions, or you can contact me through AAS. But I also just want to thank you again, Michael and Sam, for such a beautiful, short and sweet and loving piece that's so impactful. And thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
This film and this conversation is going to live on YouTube at the American Association of Suicidology's YouTube site, and we'll list these resources underneath. So if you come back and check later, this will be available, so you guys can find both Dr. McGann and Kathryn on their sites. But we really did want to keep it short and sweet and really just kind of give you guys an idea of some of the work and the journey that we've been on. And thank you for ending on such an incredible view of hope. And it reminds me of like how strong and beautiful Michael and I have come out of this, you know, and what a gift it is to get to know both Vanessa and Kathryn after this. And there have been just incredible journey, as hard as they've been, incredible journeys from this and incredible gifts of making this film and sharing this film with an audience and making art and even just the deep personal journey of getting to know myself better in my own mind and who I want to be in this world. So thank you for bringing us back to that and reminding us that bearing witness is kind of the greatest human gift that we have and get to experience on this planet. So thank you everyone for being witness to this tonight.
Thank you everyone. And you know, anybody who wants to continue a conversation, I'm sure you can both reach out to Sam or I on our emails or social medias. Many people here probably know us personally or can find us on Facebook and Instagram if you don't. But wow, this has been an incredible night. Thank you so much for everybody who came. And thank you so much to Vanessa and Kathryn who shared their stories and their expertise.
Thank you.
We don't know how to leave, so Chris is going to take us off. But thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful night. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks.